Welcome to 200 Level Go. In today's video, we're going to take the software we've been working on and we're going to make those endpoints accept and return JSON, and we're going to expand our DynamoDB table to store useful bits like the email address and the name of the users that are using the system. We're going to get started by having our local DynamoDB running. So we have that running already. It's listing on port 8000. That was just run with docker run with port mapping of 8000 on localhost, 8000 on the container, the Amazon DynamoDB local. So that's running. Let's get back to our code. And we still have the same information that we had last time, where we set up a table if it doesn't exist. And we have a couple of handlers. We've got an insertion handler, and we have a hello handler, which is kind of our get. So here we have our hello and store it. And first thing we're going to do is, well, let's fix this typo here. Make that insert handler. And we're going to make the accepting of JSON the first thing that we're going to do. So to do that, we're going to want to have a new struct that represents our user. Let's make that now. So we're going to do a type struct, user struct, and for fields, we know we want to have the user ID. That's the thing in our DynamoDB table. That's our hash key. And when we serialize and deserialize this, or marshal and unmarshal it, we want this field to be user underscore ID. So we annotate it like that. And we want email and name. Go. I have our quick comment saying this is a 200 level Go user. Now, for our insert handler, the very first thing that we're going to want to do is to read in the item that's given to us, because we want to make sure that we can interpret the JSON into one of these user structs. So before we do anything else, that's what we're going to do. And we want to make a new decoder. And it's going to take the request body. We want to decode this into our user struct. We give it the address of our user struct, and assuming everything is good there, we'll now have a user struct with these fields populated from the request. Let's handle this error first. And what should we do if we're given something we don't understand? We're going to send back a bad request and just return from there. So we're going to set our header to HTTP 400. And our string we're going to return is going to be, hey, an error happened, and hopefully give some information about why we're returning this error code. All right, so we got that part done. Now we actually want to store the information, and instead of taking this hard-coded string here, we actually want to put in the information that our user has. So we're going to replace this with user ID. And that is all that we have to do for this part. So it's going to make our user ID populate with the user ID that was passed in. We also want the other fields that are part of this user and save those as well, because DynamoDB is NoSQL. Instead of having to do something in the table definition, we can add our new fields here. So if we want to add email, we'll look similar to this. And same thing with name. And now it's going to store user ID, email, and name for this, and we can pull that back out. And something else we want to make sure we do is have an HTTP 200 saying everything went okay. Let's add that at the end. And that handles our insert. For our get, we want to do something similar because we want to have the user ID specified, and we don't really care about anything else in our user struct, but we know that we want to have at least that user ID. So for now, we're just going to take in the user struct as JSON and look up that user by their user ID and return it. It's going to look very similar. And we want to make another decoder. We want to decode into our user. And if an error happened, we're going to do the same error handling. And we want to make sure that we return here so that if we can't figure out what user we want to look up, we want to return right away instead of executing any other code. And with that, we'll do the same thing where we want to look this up by user ID. So our get item request only needs to specify this hash key. But once we do that, it'll return everything that it has for it. And we can convert that into our user that right now doesn't have everything in it. It might have just the user ID and the other fields are blank. And what we want to return is going to be all the fields filled out. So we're going to do that. We're also going to take our error handling, and we want to do similar things where if an error occurred while getting this item, like it doesn't exist, we want to make sure that the user is made aware of it. And then we want to make a new user to return. User to return. It's going to be a new user. It's going to have a user ID, email, and name. And for now, we're going to make these just empty strings. And we want to turn this into JSON that's returned. So we want to use json.marshal to make that. That'll give us our JSON that we can write as a string. If this doesn't work out well, we need to handle the error. And if we can't make JSON from an object that we should be able to, something's gone terribly wrong. So we're going to do an internal server error. And return early. But if everything worked out well, we're going to return JSON. And we're going to write out a string representation of JSON to return. Because JSON.Marshall returns a slice of bytes, and we just need the string implementation of it. And that should do it. Let's verify this. So our game plan is, we know that there's nothing in the DynamoDB local copy because it's been shut down and restarted. So let's try to fetch something that doesn't exist, and then we'll try to insert something that does exist and fetch it back out and do an update and make sure that works. Let's run this. Right, we have our table in here. We're going to use curl to test this. We know it's running on localhost port 3030. And see where that endpoint is again. It is /hello. We curl that, saying, yeah, bad request, because it's trying to take the JSON that we didn't send it and do something with it. So didn't crash, that's good. Let's send it some JSON. We know we want the user ID, name, and the email. Okay, now it says empty reply from server. Let's make sure that we don't have any. Oh, looks like we had a crash. So let's find out what happened on that. Main.go line 143. What happened here is getting too happy with some copy and paste and doing some other code. Error doesn't exist. So with a string, item wasn't there. Let's try this again. Run. Try curling. Excellent. Item wasn't there. That's what we expect. Now we want to do the same thing, but we want to send it to the other endpoint, which is the /storeIt. And this will insert it into the database. Okay, it says inserted. Now, we go back to hello. Let's try this where we just give it the ID. Everything else is going to be blank. So our user ID is 1234. Let's see if it comes back out. Well, we got the JSON shape, but nothing's in there because that's something we haven't done yet. Let's get on that. So it returned this. Now all we need to do is take everything from our item return from DynamoDB and we need to populate it here. To do that, we have R, which is the get item request response. R has an item, and inside that item is a slice of the fields for it. So we know we're going to have a user ID, and it's going to be a type string that's going to cast it to something we can use. And it's going to be very similar for email. And name. And the .s at the end is something from the Amazon SDK where it'll make that into more of a Go string so we can use. Now, these are saying that can't use pointers as literals, so we will dereference them, and that should work. Let's verify that email, name, user ID all matches our insert. User ID, email, name, excellent. Should be ready to go. Let's run it and find out. There we go. We only passed in the user ID, and we see the user ID, our email that we set, and our name. To verify this works, let's do this again and overwrite something like change our name. Oh, today I'm going to go by Matt. We do the same thing where we provide our user ID of 1234 and have the localhost 3030/hello. It should pull out the new version of it, which has the name of Matt. There we go. Email is the same, name changed, user ID is the same. So we've successfully had our service both accept and return JSON. We just demonstrated that. And we expanded the DynamoDB table to store useful information more than just the user ID. So that was our goal for today. Thanks for watching, and make sure to check us out on Twitter. We're at 200_level. We're at 200levelgo.com. We have Patreon. Look us up, 200levelgo. And we got a mailing list on our website. Check that out. You get a free 200level Go Gotchas document so you can avoid some of the more common mishaps and pitfalls in Go. That's free. You can sign up for a mailing list at 200levelgo.com. And thanks for watching. Keep on coding.